Hey guys, I can see a bunch of people in here. Welcome to a brand new season of Future Forward Sessions. This is 3.0. I always find it interesting when you say how to say three when you say 3.0 instead of saying three. I've always wondered why we do that. 3.0? 3.0 doesn't sound as nice, but I'm not going to ramble on. I'm not going to do that part. But welcome to a new season. We're going to be doing a bunch of interesting discussions this year. We're going to be talking about everything from marketing to healthcare to the creator economy to AI data. I know a bunch of the stuff which we spoke about last year, but we've really taken them to a different zone, and a bunch of newer stuff which we didn't talk about last time. I'm going to kick this one off with a very special guest. I've got Sivaram Parameswaran here. He's the head of brand marketing for LinkedIn India. Also, someone who I can call a co-podcaster. So we wear common hats on that front. I'm excited to talk to him about all things hybrid marketing in general. Hey, Shivam.
Hey, Varun, thank you so much for having me. That was really kind introduction. And thank you for doing this. I realize we're doing this for the second time now. And the first time, of course, like you referenced, was on your podcast.
Yeah.
So yeah, good to be here.
Which feels like a different lifetime when we did that. It's almost like a couple of years ago in a time when we would. And that's an interesting point, right? We did a time when you would sit in a studio together and you would record these things the same way how you would do some of these things in front of a live audience in an actual physical environment. But a lot has changed since we recorded that last conversation on that podcast.
Yeah.
I wanted to kick this off by actually asking you, how do you think the entire market, and I know it's a broader macro question, but I thought it's a good way to kind of kick this one off. How do you think the broader marketing space has really changed? I mean, especially over the last year, but in recent times.
I think just a second first to realize that when we did do that podcast, that was in a closed room with limited ventilation, sitting exactly 1 foot from each other. So, I mean, it's as alien an environment that it can get. So, which is why I wanted to take a moment, to call out that this isn't normal. There is nothing called the new normal. I think the country is battling day and night against the virus. So. That is one thing I absolutely do not want to take the focus away from. And, for once, I think we're reprioritizing what is important to us, and that is our loved ones. So I think that's good. And I hope we come out of this better. As for marketing, I think it's been a pretty big move for everyone in the marketing industry and outside the marketing industry. I think personally, professionally, a lot of things have changed. Some of the things have changed for the better, and I'll come to that, I think, later in the chat. There are a lot of good things that have now started trickling in, because marketing isn't devoid of life, right? It's not in isolation. Marketing reflects life. Marketing, in some ways, can help life move forward, and we've seen so many trends that have changed us for the better. I remember early last year when we were suddenly scrambling for sanitizers. And so many companies were stepping in. They were changing their SKUs and they were trying to, make sanitizers. And I think that's now something that is focusing every brand's energies into thinking of what does the brand really stand for. Yes, I make a certain product, but what does that mean in my customer's life? Like how do I actually contribute to giving value, right? I think one of the other biggest things that has changed, and that's, I think, closer to how I approach my work, is how we're treating our teams now, right? We're becoming more empathetic. We're more real. We're finally prioritizing the right things, like I said. And that's actually trickling down into how we're doing the marketing speak now. I think it's become more empathetic. Brands who you would originally think were a little more stuffy are not as stuffy. Who would have thought? I mean, whenever you hear the word Borosil, what comes to your mind, right? You've seen them, make sure that their employees feel valued and they feel secure in their future. I think Polycabs is one more that I think put out an announcement today. The last time I saw anything related to Polycabs, which is actually wiring, and as a layman, I wouldn't know what to do with a Polycab product. But now that I feel that they have placed their priorities the right way, they're investing in their teams, their talent, that makes me immediately think of them in the same bracket as any other brand that I use on a daily basis, which has a consumer touch point. So overall, I think it's good for us. I mean, of course, the pandemic's not good for us, but the fact that we are reacting to this so positively in a way that we can then help, give help, we can get help. You've seen conversations on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, making sure everyone who needs help gets that help, and brands jumping in, not just influencers. Everyone's trying to help everyone who needs it. I think that's a fantastic move that has come out of, I mean, if there is a silver lining to this pandemic, I mean, if there is such a thing, then this is at least waking everyone up to move in that direction.
You make a very relevant point, right? There was, I mean, even till recently, advertising to a large extent and marketing in general was called, it was perceived as fluff in many ways. Like, you would do stuff to kind of get eyeballs, you do stuff to kind of, get that peak in terms of conversation, and do a lot of that stuff. But what's kind of changed, I feel, in the last, especially the last year, is that we're a lot more careful about saying, that term causevertising.
Yeah.
I think it's taken a lot more, I mean, a lot more focus now. Before it was just like, well, let's not causevertise. But was it really followed is, I mean, that's an open-ended, actually even a loaded question in that sense. But what I feel is important now is that whatever brands do, words like being authentic, actually, coming through with what you said you will do, all those pieces have really kind of changed. And I feel that's also kind of affected the broader marketing space, right? It's not just, marketing is still it hasn't suddenly shifted focus and say, okay, we'll only do what we can to help, which a lot of them are doing phenomenally well. Like I know just the fact that I remember that when I was putting some stuff out, many of those things were shared by brands. And I saw that and they were sharing stuff from across the board. And so suddenly you saw brands saying, okay, we're handing over our own identities to be helpful right now. So that obviously made them seem very authentic in the right way. But at the other end, they've also had, I mean, as brands, you also had to deal with the fact that, you had a traditional mix and hybrid. Had some things that you would do as traditional media, some things that you would do as digital media. But now that's all mixed up, right? The many things which were front and center, which have now not even you don't have an option to use them, like let's say live events, etc. And on the other end, something like an influencer marketing, which was just kind of picking up, is now pretty much like they are your billboard, they are your, when you couldn't do production in studios, that they were the ones producing content. So when you look at that aspect, how do you think that's really kind of affected how you look at the overall marketing mix?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that then makes you want to think about the definitions that we have already, right? There's something called traditional media. I've hated the phrase forever. It's there's also the definition of what's above the line, below the line. There's something also called through the line. And it's all great jargon to put in your presentations. I highly recommend this.
I remember Kunal Jeswani once said this, the Ogilvy industry. He said there is no line. And I couldn't agree with him more. And he was like, we use these things, but there is no line. So
yeah, because traditional media at some point in time was defined as something that will not give, because it was advertising on TV, putting out billboards. It's very hard to ascertain the immediate impact that it has. Like, you can't track the entire user journey from, okay, I saw an ad, and then I went and bought a pack of chips, right? It's really hard to figure that out. And that was more general awareness. And then there's below the line, where, of course, it was at that point, I mean, this is long gone, but direct marketing. Right? Like, I can put in a code there, and next time you use it, I know you've seen my direct marketing mailer or whatnot. Actually, LinkedIn did a global study, and it's called the Age of Agility, highly relevant. And this is where it talks about how brands have to be authentic. And the other thing, not just being real, but it's about having a clear sense of purpose. Because this is a very evolving, changing world of work. What does that mean for someone who wants to now communicate to their customer, whose priorities may not be what they were a year ago, a year and a half ago? It's evolving immensely. It's also forcing brands who were, for lack of a better word, again, I'm going back to a traditional sense of marketing. A lot of brands were really hard set on, this is great for us, this works, so let's stick with it. Why fix something that isn't broken? Which I agree is the right attitude to take in a lot of places. But now it's forcing you to think outside of that, right? Would you now associate yourself with an Instagram influencer or someone on LinkedIn who has the reach to go tell your story because you're not able to run that event anymore, right? Now that's at least you're asking the question. You may end up not doing it, but now you're being forced to ask that question to yourself of your brand. Can your brand lend itself to all these different mechanisms with which you can reach your end consumer? You can increase, sales and so on and so forth. So it's forcing us to think differently, and change is. Everything changes as much as it remains constant. So I'm sure 3 to 4 years later we'll be revisiting this and understanding what has since changed. And I'm really hoping we're out of this pandemic by then, and everything's back to normal. But I think it's really forcing everyone to think, and that's always a good thing.
Yeah, it also brings me to an interesting point, right? When we looked at, even the term hybrid marketing, and I remember when we were kind of coming into sync, what all do we talk about? The term hybrid marketing itself, in some cases, has just become marketing now. All marketing is hybrid, because if you aren't hybrid in the sense that you are mixing up different kinds of mediums and platforms and different touch points, you aren't going to be reaching your consumer in all the places that they are, because today's consumer is everywhere. A lot of them are sitting in their homes, but they are everywhere, right? Courtesy the internet and courtesy everything else. So in that case, how do you look at keeping something like the brand voice consistent? How do you keep that? Because it's tricky to kind of keep that when you have so many, because you're no longer creating. I know we keep going back to the word tradition, but I'm going to use a different term. We keep going back to a time when it was, which I'm told by many people in advertising from before, that it was simpler because your touch points were far lesser, right? You would have retail, and you would have billboards and print and television commercials and a few others, and that would pretty much be it. But now it's so dynamic. How do you still keep that voice consistent, especially when you're going this hybrid?
Yeah, that's a great point, because even when I was thinking of hybrid marketing, I felt like that is just marketing now, because I think everyone's educating themselves on what are the different ways you can now tell your brand story. So that is step one, just to understand what each medium is appropriate for. And there are a lot of unsaid rules in each medium. Like there's no handbook that tells you what works for you, because it's very different. And we'll talk about some of the bigger events that have happened in the past, like the IPL later in the chat. But that forces you to now adapt for whatever it's worth. Like whoever you were speaking with for traditional, and they then defined it as simpler. Simpler by definition doesn't mean it'll work. It's just simple for the brand manager to deploy their marketing campaign. That doesn't guarantee success, right? But now it also meant you're not able to track everything. Success was a little vaguer, a little, a lot of it was tied to sales, continues to ties to sales, and but now what we're able to do with newer channels of marketing, you're able to attribute success at every level of the funnel. Now you know how many people clicked on your link, right? So that's the top of the funnel. Can you now figure out how many people search for you on Google? I've never heard of Cred before I saw the ad, right? So now am I going and checking on Google what is this product, right? So you can track branded search. Does that? I'm going back to this management funda, which I don't want to, but because there's a lot of jargon. But there's the IDA model, where the awareness, intent, desire, and action. We are not able to track all of that. So that forces you to then adapt to each form of communication. If you are going to be on TV, right? Because that by definition means the big bucks. Especially if it's in like something like the IPL, right? When I'm describing the IPL to my teammates who are across the world, I try and use a reference that they can immediately latch onto. It's literally 9 Super Bowls is what it is. A Super Bowl gets around, I think, 100 million, 110 million views over a weekend. IPL gets, I think, 6-7 times of that. So that's how big it is. And it's by, I think, the biggest sports tournament in the world. So if you're going to be present on the IPL, what does it mean to tell your story? Now, it's not just, can I be true to my brand, but can I cut through the clutter and make sure, anyone who's by chance sitting through the ads and sitting through strategic timeout, are they still Sunday? Are they coming back to the TV and saying, I want to see this again? what defines, it's very, very hard. Uh, it's gotten very complex. So
Mm.
that's what I'm saying. When I was simpler, maybe it was easier. You just build a 30-second or a 1 minute, and then you give it to all the TV stations, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
Then there was a time in the middle where we were just, getting used to the idea of YouTube, and this is a long time ago. And I think it still holds true for ads on YouTube. And we've discussed this in the past, where you say, brand name hyphen 30-second TVC on
Yeah.
YouTube, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what does that? I'm not here to watch your TVC, right? It's not a TVC the moment it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
So a lot of brands then realize that, it's not just a plug and play anymore. Just because it's a video platform, it means many different things. Um, so, like, going back to what I started with, I think we're starting to educate ourselves. And what that means is that will then tell us what each platform stands for. And then that will then drive our ability to make the most of each platform, each channel. Everyone said print is dying. We're still
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
in spite of everything, in spite of going through the pandemic. People are now paying for subscriptions. People understand the value that they get.
Mm.
Everyone thought print will get replaced. That's not true. It hasn't been true, at least for now, in spite of shorter formats. Like, we've seen TikTok and Reels and so many different channels. If you can then customize your content and tell different parts of your story, as opposed to creating one story in a TVC and just making sure everyone sees that. So that's how things changed.
Yeah. And you mentioned cred a while back, and Neha in the chat has an interesting question, right? And I think that's relevant. She's like, meme marketing plays an important role in today's social media and positioning the brand. So how will that work into the mix rather? And that's actually, I think it's very relevant in Cred's example, because if you look at what they did last year as well as what they just did, they are technically doing what is a great YouTube video with the brand at the start.
Yeah.
And it gets all the talk of the town. And the question always comes, and I know this because I hear a lot of the slightly more older school advertising folks say that, but people don't know what the brand does, or people don't know. And you would have a certain arc to what every brand commercial needs to have. This doesn't have that. Doesn't have that product punch in the end. Doesn't have a lot of those things. And so when you look at something like that and look at the kind of reach it gets, kind of talk it gets, what's your perspective on this form of advertising? Because I think this meme marketing aspect is interesting, considering you have agencies who do what they say only meme marketing now. So where does that fit into the mix?
Okay, that's a very loaded question because I know everyone has an opinion.
I've loaded it, so I will I will contribute as well halfway through this. I realized I was loading it while I was saying it.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing the blame. I've seen so many people, be outright in sharing their perspective, which is great, right? I think Tanmay Bhatt posted on LinkedIn and on his other channels, where suddenly he's seen so many marketers crawl out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
And that is great, right? You want everyone to have an opinion. You remember the days of any publicity is good publicity, which isn't true. I mean, I don't think it's true. It's of course a matter of opinion, but I don't think it's true. You also need context when you need content. The one thing that struck me about that ad is it immediately got everyone's attention, right? Quote unquote broke the internet in many ways. They did exactly that last year. I think they upped it this year to a degree with that Rahul Dravid ad. And I've heard exactly the same sentiment. I don't know about why should I use cred, or I have so many points and what do I do with those points? They actually did a good thing by switching the points where you could then contribute to COVID relief later in their brand journey, which is great, right? Which is what you want to do. They hear people talking about the number of points they have that they can't use, but guess what? You can do fantastic thing and help anyone who's in need. So that's a great move from them. And this is, part and parcel of what cause marketing is and how you can stand behind a cause, and what your brand then, can it lend itself to that cause? Can it really make a dent in the universe, as opposed to just putting a Facebook post and saying that doesn't work anymore. The idea of cred, I think the ad itself, if we had to, and let's just stick with the Rahul Dravid ad, I agree that there is some part of it which clearly it doesn't list out the number of things I get off cred. But it's not meant to do that. I'm coming at it from the point of, I don't know what went in the brains of the marketing manager who said this looks great, right? I don't know what they're tracking. There are a lot of assumptions that I'll put forward when I drop an opinion on the internet, and I've been guilty of this many times personally, where I've had an opinion about something, but over a period of time you understand, if you put yourself in their shoes, what are they tracking, right? Just look at the ad. They know it did well. Everyone's talking about cred now. There are so many parts of the funnel that they could possibly going after. If you were to just say top of the funnel, right? Increase awareness, check, right? You can't, I mean, that's not non-debatable. Everyone's talking about it, right? So check. Are people searching for cred? Like, are people looking to find out more about their brand? Are people going to the LinkedIn company page? You can actually check a lot of these things. It's very possible for them to see an uptick there, right? So because everyone's talking about it in the next step of the funnel, yes, everyone's going to check. Fantastic, right? Great. What is the next thing that they could possibly be doing? They could be looking at growth, right? Getting more people to join cred, right? So that is your eventual desire in action in your IDA model, right? Yes, it will be not as big as you would expect it to be, but some people would just sign up to see what the entire chatter is about. The other thing I think a lot of people are missing is, do they have, because they have spent a lot of money over a period of time, they obviously have users who've come on the platform. They've thought it's not for me. They've signed up, but then they've not come back to the app. Do they want to resurrect some of those dormant users? Right now, suddenly you're seeing this cred ad. Oh, I signed up. Maybe I should go back and check. So they could be doing really well on a lot of these things. And yes, it doesn't maybe tell everything that I want to know about the product, but I have the ability to go check it out. So it's a 30-second commercial on the IPL. There's only so much it can do. If it can break the cutter, great. I think I would want to build such an ad, not for LinkedIn, but I think that's what is also in everyone's head, where you want to build, you want to be in the place of the marketers who built that. So that's, I think, it's been a journey. I didn't immediately arrive at that response, but I would love to hear what you think.
So, one of the things you mentioned just now, right, about the fact that you have people who signed up for it. And I remember when cred first came out, I'm going to go through that curve, just look at this brand itself. Not everybody could get it. You had to get it through someone. And I know that, like, Rohit had it, and I bugged him because you have FOMO. So FOMO really played hard on that initial part of it. Never really used the app that much. When I saw it, it made sense. I do have a few credit cards. I'm like, fair enough, puts it all in one place, makes it simpler for me. But only after last year's campaign have I, over the last 1 year, actually like properly used it. I would say, like, I was using it sporadically, but have I become more consistent? And I don't know, when you said that, I thought about it. And what I've actually seen is that I feel that they're also building the brand in a certain way to set it apart from the pack, right? Financial services as a fintech there are many players in it. They all sit in different buckets of how they want to be perceived. Cred is somehow kind of set apart and seeming cooler because it does all these things. The app itself is a little this thing, and over time I've seen them add more and more features. So you actually go into it, you discover a lot of things. My perception is that they want people to keep going in there and what you said is bang on it. Keep poking them or banging them on the head till they keep going back to it again and again. And every time you go back, you find something else which you can do. Be it like checking your credit score, be it like, there's so many aspects, like, and I've also been seeing some stuff pop up, which is this stuff is coming soon. So I think that while they're building it, they give these sparks of virality. It's like, there was this, and interesting you mentioned Tanmay, right? I remember talking to Tanmay sometime back on the podcast, and he'd mentioned something. He said that you're either that kind of a YouTuber who wants that one spark every month, where you spend a lot of time, make that one video which goes really out there, or you're doing something every day that is kind of going out there and getting a lot of traction, right? So I'm guessing cred is the first kind. They focus once in a while, give that big splash, and then we'll focus on the product. But there's so many brands like that now, right? If I look at D2C brands and how they've kind of changed the game in terms of just how they use marketing, for a large amount of them, it's been primarily been a lot of digital. But what I have also noticed is that as soon as they start raising a bit of money, they all start doing a
Mhm.
lot of what is deemed non-digital. I'm not going to call it traditional. It's a non-digital in that sense. Everything is digital, but and I think that's really the interesting the way the mix kind of plays together as well, right? Is that fact that digital is easiest in terms of access from a cost point of view, but as you scale up, you can actually afford to add in eventually the IPL ad, but somewhere in between you have to do a billboard. You'll be able to do a television commercial in general and stuff like that. So at some point, I don't know, the mix is so hybrid, and what you said is so relevant is the fact that it depends on what you're doing it for. If you don't know what you're doing it for, somebody says, okay, let's make a viral video, then you know that I don't have to even get into why that is all kinds of wrong. But apart from that, I think it has to be about what you really want from it.
Yeah, just the one last thing on that note. For some reason, we thought Cred doesn't have accountability internally. We just assumed they just built it for kicks. Which I can assure you that is not how they run the business. The other thing that they did really do well, and this is going back to the Tanmay idea of building content. The first rule of building content is build content. Keep going back. You're a content creator. You know this so well. You've done a great job building that brand for yourself. You have to keep putting stuff out, right? You lose. It's really easy to be forgotten. So staying there is the hardest thing you can do, and that is just the first thing you can do. And then you get to how good the design is, and how, is the value prop from credit just it reminds you regularly that your credit card payment is due. Great. I don't want to miss my credit card payment. Number one, it looks beautiful is number two, number three, number four, right? And I like Rahul Dravid is number 15, but at least it's on the list. So it's fine if they didn't do just in the 30-second set. I'm sure they'll do better next time. But what I'm saying is, I have to actively teach myself to be a little more open-minded. It's really easy to just assume that it didn't do well or it wouldn't do well. I don't know. So I think that is another thing that we go back to how this has changed. We're being a little more empathetic, and we're putting ourselves in each other's shoes so much more often now. And that I think has helped all of us grow.
I think also the other point is the fact that we always seem to look at a piece of content, even if it's a commercial, as a piece of content, but it's obviously so different across different platforms. Like what you would create, how does that show itself in terms of just an overall brand campaign or a thought when it goes on, let's say, a YouTube, goes on a LinkedIn, etc. How have you seen that part change, especially from a LinkedIn context? How have you seen that change in terms of just like, what is the right way to kind of do it? And there was a question in here which someone put in as well, is saying, how is that kind of really moved from how do I get this out there on LinkedIn and do it right point of view?
So number one, I think just like I started with, enough people need to start educating themselves on what their brand stands for. And it needs a lot of introspection, needs a lot of retrospection. What is the one thing? What are the different value props? What is the single key value proposition? A lot of this is told to us. We don't challenge it. We just accept it at face value. So I think we need to start challenging that. And the universe is making us challenge it right now, because now we have to expend energy into figuring out, is this the best use of our time? Is this the best use of our energy? Best use of our money? LinkedIn particularly, I think one thing, and I think this was a part of a study we did, this called Jobs on the Rise. And you'll see on the platform, a lot of brands are actually increasing emphasis on communicating their values clearly. There's, internal understanding that we need to stand behind something. There is time being spent to identify that. It's not the first thing that, they see fits the bill. There's actually active energy being put behind that. Marketers actually play a really important role in that, because they're helping engage in transparent and meaningful conversations. Now, you did describe marketing as fluff. Now, for whatever it's worth, it's not fluff, at least at this point in time. It's life changing. It's giving you opportunity to grow. It's giving you opportunity to explore. It's making you think. On LinkedIn specifically, I think there's a lot of things that you can do build your brand. And when I say build your
Mm.
brand, I don't mean just the company you work for.
Mm.
I think you can do yourself a favor and start building your brand. I think anyone who's listening has seen or watching. Sorry, I'm so used to the podcast way of doing it. Anyone who's watching and listening to this, I highly recommend checking out Varun's LinkedIn profile. He's got manicured posts going out, and there's a great story behind that. I will cover that right after this. But see the amount of energy that goes into that, and the eventuality of it is great, right? You don't see what when you're so close to it, you don't realize what the next step adds to the entire process. Uh, and which is why you can do a bunch of things that you can start with educating our audience. We already covered this, right? You can absolutely talk about your products, right? I would recommend you talk about them in a way that everyone understands, because not everyone is immediately adept at what you're trying to tell them. So spend more time on what you want to say, and uh, adding human touch, right? I think someone just in the comments said emotional intelligence. That
Yeah.
is incredibly important when you're talking about your brand, right? It's not buy my bag of chips. There's a lot more than goes into that. Going back to your question of how different things can um, lend themselves to different platforms. On LinkedIn, we recently added stories, right?
Mm.
uh, Now you would immediately expect to have bite-sized info there, right? I wouldn't expect you to tell a 10-minute story on your story, right? I want it to be quick, I want it to be snappy. You're used to the experience of stories, this is what it does. And the last thing, and I'm sorry I harp on this a million times over, I'll continue to make it a two-way street.
Mm.
There's a reason there's chat enabled on this conversation.
Yeah.
It's not just me talking to Varun or Varun talking to me. It's important that we're talking to everyone who's in the room, and now that room is virtual.
Yeah.
Now that means it can accommodate as many people as possible. It's not limited by the room we rent for an event. Everyone who can and wants to can join this
Mm.
virtual event. So
Yeah.
it's really important to start understanding what all of these add up, and how you can then use LinkedIn in different ways. You can there are different products that you can use on the platform. Stories is a great way to start. There's of course, I'm sure you whoever's running the brand for a company already has a LinkedIn company page. You're using the right language, you're putting the effort in design, and all of this of course adds up, right? You can't see them in how they come together, but from 30,000 feet they eventually all add up.
Yeah. What I think is also interesting, and I know you mentioned that my manicured post, but I have a lot of stuff. I literally have a laundry list of things which I know that I need to be able to do better on my LinkedIn content, which I know. And that's actually the thing, right? If you look at the number of platforms out there, I keep going back to that, is that there are, while you might say a story is in one versus stories in other, they're all stories, but the
Mhm.
platforms themselves define what you put out on them.
Yeah.
The weirdest example I can give of how to break that down is if you actually go on to Gary Vee's website. He actually
Of
lists
course.
down saying what are you going to get on each platform he's on. Like, he's very clear. Like, you will get this, you'll get business insights on LinkedIn, you will get stuff like random stuff on Instagram. So he's broken that down. I think that's really important. Is that do you also kind of take that call saying, do I want the same narrative, the same content flowing across all? But in
Yeah.
that case, almost like shift it around a little bit. Or am I saying I'm giving you different things on different platforms, and that's actually the right way to use it? And when I say platforms, it could actually be physical as well, right? What I'm giving you will change in many ways from context, from just from the content perspective, or from,
Right.
even from a context perspective, when you move from one to the other.
I think the one thing we did miss out, and you're absolutely right, hit the nail on the head, is flexibility. Not just in our day-to-day lives. And hats off for Swiggy. I think they kickstarted the 4-day week idea, and I know a lot of people are still latched on to it. I think Oyo just announced it today or something like that. But flexibility is really important, and that goes across everything that you do, and that will then define how different stories are being told. Yes, every platform does um, have different ways of telling different stories. Um, which part of your story can lend itself to LinkedIn? Right now, it doesn't mean professional context has to be formal or stuffy. Um, LinkedIn stories, by definition, is a more casual format because it's ephemeral. right? So if you were doing certain things a certain way in your sponsored post, for instance, or your company post, you can now leverage LinkedIn stories to tell the same things or things that possibly are connected um, in a very different way, which is now reaching out to a different set of people, reaching out to a different set of audiences. It's giving everyone who's coming to stories a different thing altogether. So I think flexibility is key. Now that holds true for your brand message. That holds true for your vehicle with which you're carrying that brand message, and the eventuality of what the consumer receives. I don't think we spend enough time on. We spend more time on what I want to say as opposed to what my end consumer wants to hear. I mean, this is not my favorite thing, but Steve Jobs said the consumer doesn't know what they want. It holds true in many cases. So, I mean, would this be a marketing chat without us mentioning Steve Jobs?
Of course. And there's also another aspect, that is that, and you briefly touched upon it in between, and I think it's important to talk about, is that just what makes up a marketing team today, and how that functions together has also fundamentally changed, right?
Yeah.
And I think that translates on a few levels. On one level, it's also changed how much is in-house for a marketing in a company versus how much do you work with an agency, etc. over there. But also on the other extent, what is the mix of people? I mean, how do you work together, and all that stuff also changes as well. So, how have you seen that part change?
I think this is something which has been consistent between you and I, because we've worked together in many places before we continue to work together. And I can comment from LinkedIn's perspective as well. I think we have a phenomenal work culture, and that I think is extended over the hard times that we've since had to witness. Companies are starting to look out for each other, and within marketing teams, I think we're, like I said, empathy has now transcended everything that we do. When you think of partners, of how you're working with each other, right? Now, I think my manager said this. She said, fantastic person, Srividya. I highly recommend you look her up on LinkedIn, Srividya Gopani. She said this, and this is in the context of delegation, where 70% is good enough. Well, let's say you've hired someone to be a part of your team, and you manage their time, and you obviously can't do everything by yourself, which is why you're now a manager and you're working with someone, and your metaphorical plate is full. So until you take something off, you can't add something else, right? So if you had to give that something off to the next person that you've hired, of course there is a way that you write an email, or you make a deck, or you present, or you talk to people. But that's not the holy grail of how everything is done, right? Things were getting done even before you joined, or before you became a marketer, or anything for that matter. The ability that the next person can get it 70% right is brilliant, because the 30% can then get them to show what they're made of, right? Give them that opportunity to do what they want to do. Otherwise, you're just making copies of yourself, and I can assure you that's not always a good thing. If you watch Star Wars, you will know that clones are not great. When you extend this to teams you work with at for your marketing campaigns, let's say your partner creative agencies, your partner media agencies, they are the experts, right? And the majority of you might be in-house, and you're experts at what your brand stands for, your creative design, how you can lend yourself to different forms of communication. You're the expert with that. But your partner teams are better, if not great, at making sure it's a cohesive story you're telling externally, right? Finding those gems that exist within your framework. And I'm going to, of course, bring LinkedIn into this. We've forever told stories that we found on the platform. And that includes all the advertising that we've done. We've advertised on the IPL, I think, for 3 or 4 years now running consistently. All our stories are actually real member stories. These are people on the platform who've used the platform, who've then found success in different ways. And we've actually reached out to them. We've shot with them. And these are all real members, right? Not actors. And so it's a very different ballgame when you think of, working with real people versus actors. And they bring so many different things to the table. It's unbelievable how it is to work with real people who have real stories, because they bring that passion to the stage. And we've actually put them on the IPL. We've put them on billboards. And That's what I meant by authentic. Authenticity is not something just a keyword we throw everywhere, right? It transcends what LinkedIn does on a daily basis. We use real members to tell our stories on the IPL, which is by definition a lot of money. So if I'm going to put someone on the IPL, I need LinkedIn to stand for it, and that's what something I'm really proud of the work that we've done. I think um, going back to the idea of working with partners who are external, not in your immediate teams, there's a reason you work with them. They are the experts. And if you're going to work with them, you have to build that trust that they will bring their best to the table as well. There's no reason to believe that they won't, right? Always assume positive intent at work, outside with loved ones. Just assume positive intent, start from there. And that can then actually help everyone get that autonomy to then bring their best self. And then all if you're comfortable with each other, all if you're trusting each other, especially in the new environment, right? I can't spend an hour coming to your office, or you can't spend an hour coming to my office, just because we did treasure that one-to-one experience that much more, but we can't for many reasons. So I think starting with empathy and building trust is very important. So I think that has changed a lot. I've heard that, and we understand that my doorbell can ring at any point in time. We all remember the BBC video of the gentleman whose kids come scurrying into the back, and he gets really agitated. Now it's just par for the course. I have a dog who's somewhere in the house. I expect her to run into the screen at any point in time.
I've had meetings when I've done, like, daughters walked in, people have walked in, that door has opened randomly. Stuff like that has happened. So it's even that aspect actually has made it interesting. I wouldn't say the word, I don't know if the word interesting is right. And there are a bunch of questions around this, because people want to know two things. One is, okay, if I'm just starting off as a marketer, in this space, in today's world, what would generally be what you would learn was that you would go to a workplace, you'd have a lot of people together. So at some point, you would blend and learn a lot of stuff. That even though there are ways in which that is being supplemented digitally, it's not necessarily the same. And I think there's no two ways of looking at that. But at that point, if I'm starting off, what do I really need to know to be, if I'm a day one marketer today, or if I'm like maybe a day 2, day 3 one, what am I prepping myself for in terms of skill sets, and what do I really need to know, and how my work is going to be, and also the kind of like, where do I upskill myself, and where do I kind of look at where all I need to kind of upskill for me to kind of look at the future and say, okay, this is how I'm going to be moving forward, how I'm going to be building myself up.
Yeah, those are really big questions. And the reason why I say they're really big questions is because when you ask them of yourself, you're fighting pressure. If you're a day one marketer today, you're joining a company where you've just freshly out of college, just graduated, maybe you're jumping another job with a shorter stint, whatever the deal is. I think the two things that you should absolutely start with, the two skills or whatever you want to call them, is curiosity. Ask questions. There is no one place I can say will help you increase your curiosity. You have to bring it yourself. Ask questions as many as you can. I have a golden rule for everything. Every meeting, there are no stupid questions, right? I've realized many a time that if I ask that what I think is a stupid question, actually half the room was wondering exactly that, right? You will not know all the acronyms that the company uses on day one. No one expects you to know. So ask. Worst case scenario, no one will answer you. Best case scenario, someone will, right? So you have nothing to lose. The other thing is, be okay with failing. The one thing I try and work with my team is fail faster. Don't take your sweet time failing. If you're going to fail, make sure you fail faster, so then you can pick yourself up and go again. If you're successful many times over, which I hope everyone is, there is an inherent fear of failure, right? And then you want to go back to the tried and tested ways, the simpler ways, the traditional ways. And then suddenly, I don't know what this new LinkedIn platform is. I don't understand, right? So you're pushing yourself into that corner. No one else is pushing you. You're just so used to success, you're not really pushing yourself to try new things. So stick with those two golden rules: is curiosity and be ready to fail. Otherwise, there's no point, right? You have to fail to learn. If you were to just try and upskill yourself from a very how do I make sure I have all the tools that I need on day one, and and then I can be curious, and then I can be ready to fail. Is LinkedIn Learning. Sorry, I'm doing this a hard sell, but there are a ton of courses that you can actually use to get ready for day one. There's a lot of different things you can use, from just body language. How do you conduct yourself? How do you talk to people in the team? How do you express ideas? I cannot impress enough of how important it is to write an email in today's day and age. Um, it's important to have clarity, and that clarity will only come if you're aware of everything that you're saying. You can't solve calculus without knowing BODMAS, right? So you have to build that from scratch. So
I
writing
haven't
an
heard
email is
BODMAS in a long time. So.
sorry, it just appeared to me in my head the moment I said calculus. I'm afraid of calculus. So the
Who
idea is you
isn't?
have to I have to start from that to be able to, on day one, I need to start. And of course, there's enough and more content that's out there. I think we need to find the time, because it's just 24 hours in a day. No one has 25, 26, 27 hours. I wish I did. I don't. So I have to make sure I walk my dog in the same day, make sure I eat, make sure I'm spending time with my loved ones, and making sure I'm ready for tomorrow, right? So prioritize what you think is important, but make sure you're then making sure you're expending that energy. So anyone who's getting into day one, all the best. It's not easy. I'm not going to make any bones about it. I mean, it was different. A lot of the IT hacks I learned and have since continued were because the IT guy in my first office was really sweet. He would share lunch and he would tell me the admin password, right? So I knew how things worked. But that was because I was there in person, right? I wouldn't expect me to reach out to the IT admin today and expect him to tell me the admin password after being there in the company for 2 weeks. So you can't replace that. But what you can do is reach out to people, set up time on their calendars, ask them questions. No one has ever said no to me because I wanted to set up time on their calendars. Everyone's really happy. They know you're new. They were once new as well. I was once new. I was once the youngest in the room. So everyone knows what it feels to be that. So reach out, ask questions, be curious, and of course, be prepared to fail.
I just want to add a few things to what you said, right? And I feel and there's this term someone told me some time back, and I thought that's so relevant. Saying this is the present generation of people kind of coming into the workforce are the first generation of people who had tools of creation in their hands before they got into actually doing it professionally. So whether you are whatever you did in your let's say early jobs, or if you're in college and school, you are creating content. You are on all the platforms which all the marketers are trying to figure out, right? You are using it as a consumer. So you actually in many ways come in a lot more prepared and actually have a lot more I'm sure there were enough 50-plus-year-olds sitting TikTok kya hai. Like at some point that would have happened, right? But the youngest person in the room is the most important person in the room at that point of time because they knew how this worked.
That is absolutely true.
I think flipping it around and saying these are a strong punch. You're kind of coming in from a consumer point of view. You buy stuff online. You know all the hacks to get the right deals. All that stuff you do. Just flip that around, use that, and then add in all the pieces that you spoke about. So then you become holistic, right? So I don't think anybody had this range of advantages when they were starting their job. Someone in present day does, because you're coming in knowing how the consumer works.
Experience before you even join the club, right? I mean,
exactly.
That is incomparable.
Yeah. Do you think that also kind of seeps into if you are a brand who's young and just starting off today, I'm going to start marketing? Does that seep in terms of thought process as well? Is that how you look at marketing? Is just like think of it from a consumer standpoint and just start from there?
I think it's getting to hear what the consumer has to say about you has always been invaluable. And like you said, it holds true for everyone who's joining the company, right? Day one, they obviously like the company, then they have an opinion. It's absolutely critical to every plan that you have that you know what the consumer thinks of you, to hear what they will say when you're not in the room. And that actually can or may or should define a lot of what your eventual communication is, because then they will say things you possibly have never heard before. They will see things you didn't know were being used in conjunction with your brand. They will attribute a personality to you, to your brand. And those are nuggets of information you can't buy off the internet, right? You need to be sitting there and listening to someone else speak about you. And that I think is invaluable.
I'm just going to scroll through a bunch of these questions, which I feel we haven't gone towards.
Sure.
Shivangi is asking us, how can we use these new forms of marketing in B2B? I'm not the biggest B2B expert out there, have very broad-based points on it. I want to ask you if you have any points on this in terms of that specificity.
Yeah, I'm not. So I don't know if you said you weren't the biggest expert, but I'm not the biggest expert.
Neither am I. So I was like,
I'm not either. But the idea of B2B is, and someone told me this a long time ago, and this is my only information on B2B, is that you're eventually selling to a human again, right? It says brand to brand. Yes, I know that is a definition of it. And B2C means brand to consumer. But you are marketing to a person at the end of the day. A lot of emotion goes into that decision making. A lot of emotion goes into how that matrix is set up. So some of the principles still hold true for content, right? You're still trying to gain people's attention. It doesn't change necessarily a lot of the basics of what we described in terms of marketing. The channels might change. The vehicle of deliveries might change. Absolutely. It's a very different ball game, right? So it's very, very different in many ways, but it still stays the same in the core of it. Because at the end of the day, the decision maker is still a consumer. So,
yep, what you're saying is so true, right? Because at some point you're seeing, if I look at B2B marketing in terms of how it's being done today, and I look at what is B2C being done, it's almost like that. Like when we spoke about, there is no line between like ATL, BTL in the beginning. It's literally that, right? Because so many things are similar, because you have your even your traditional marketing, because of the fact that they are not traditional marketing, I'm calling it okay, B2C in that sense. What you're focusing towards is almost like how do you kind of push it from an online purchase standpoint, etc. All that stuff's kind of coming in, which is very like B2B territory in that sense. That's what they've, that side has been doing for the longest time. So it's almost a blurring line. You just need to, again, I think go back to what you said at the start. It's like just focus on why you're doing it. What are your metrics for success? Focus on that, and what your audience really is. I think that's the only way to look at it.
Yeah, your story won't change just because it's B2B, right? Your brand won't suddenly metamorphosize into something else completely. Your story stays the same, or what your value prop is remain like it stays the same. Your channels change, yes, absolutely.
There's an interesting question about how, obviously data is a strong part of it, and I know we didn't get into that, but because that's pretty much the backbone of most things that happen in marketing now. But especially with this entire conversation around first party data happening and all the moves that are happening, how are you seeing that change how you market now? I know you have access to a lot more data because
you mean because I work at LinkedIn? No, that's not true actually. I don't have access to a lot of data.
See, that was me flipping a question so that you say it's not true. So like that is me flipping it around.
It's not true at all, because I think trust has been incredibly important for us as a platform at LinkedIn, and we've actually led and made a lot of decisions which have grounded in our values with transparency at the core about how data is collected and how it's used on our platform. So we've been very transparent with a lot of that, and we've always actually kept ourselves to a much higher standard. And we have a value that we actually could, anyone in LinkedIn, you could just wake them up at 3 a.m. and ask them LinkedIn values. They will always say members first. So that's something which is at the core of how we work on a day-to-day basis, of the platform works. So to answer your question, no, I don't have access to data. But on a flip side, like I'm going to flip it the third time, for how data works for marketing, I think it should inform your marketing. It shouldn't decide your marketing. That's something that I've realized over a period of time. You can't just send out an email and expect everyone to like your campaign. Yeah. That is not, like, you can target them as much as possible. You have to build your story up. You have to understand why you're doing it. Going back to what you described, we discussed earlier. So let data inform you, not decide.
It's an interesting add-on to this. I think that plugs into how everything blends together. Sales and marketing for the longest time have been two very separate entities. But in many ways, you see marketing focus as much on sales because of how marketing is pushing kind of complete that entire cycle of things, and sales kind of blending into that mix as well. Are there a lot more blended in now than ever before?
I think it's also a result of where we are as a world now, how we define sales and marketing. Uh, if you would have asked me 10, 15 years ago, would you want to do sales? And the first thing that, that image that would have evoked is me going door to door. Literally that. Like, I'm not even going to lie. That's the immediate reaction I would have had. So I don't want to do that. But that was me back in college with no idea of how the world works, what sales actually means. Of course, I've now since realized it's not true at all. They're both equally sophisticated, industries. They come together at a lot of points in the customer journey. I don't think they're independent of each other at any point in time. They're not isolated. Marketing is a way to get more sales. I can't put it more bluntly. The eventuality of it is you want to make sure your brand does well in the way you want to track it right now. And that eventually is you want to make money, right? Unless you're a not-for-profit, then it's different. But if you're a for-profit company, it says for-profit in the name of your company. So you want to drive sales, and marketing is one of the ways you do. So a lot of companies now work really closely if they have independent sales and marketing teams. A lot of companies I've seen have combined sales and marketing teams. And of course, and then that breaks down into B2B, B2C, B2B to C. There are a lot of different ways you can approach it, but they're not independent at all. They're not isolated. They're not two different islands. We're speaking to the same person, right? Yeah. So the one thing I would love more brands, and a lot of them are already doing this, is making sure they're being conducive in their approach of customer touch points. You don't want marketing to reach out with a separate language and sales to reach out with separate language, right? Because at the end of the day, I just know you're a brand, right? So I think too, the brand is reaching out to me twice. I don't understand how you're differentiating it internally. I just see a brand reaching out to me twice. So I think that's one thing we could possibly do.
And I go back to what I used to always remember when we first started working in this space, is that you'd always have someone from sales on the client side who would move to marketing, and the marketing person would move to sales. And I saw that even for the longest time, you'd have people kind of move between those functions, because I feel companies for the longest time felt that, okay, they both need to understand how that other side works and how they can kind of grow as holistic people in the organization. But I feel that now, what you just said, they're all kind of working together in such a seamless manner that it's more blended now than let's switch roles every couple of years. In that sense, I think the blending in has actually helped it.
That's a great point. I can actually draw one differentiation. Marketing is usually a cost function. Sales is a revenue function. That differentiates them right away. One is spending the money, one is earning the money.
There is one aspect we didn't talk about enough, and I want to kind of take that as the final one we jam on before we close out on this session. What's also fundamentally changed in terms of just what marketing involves has been the whole creator economy coming in, right? The amount of, just like how that's kind of, the word economy has gotten latched onto it in recent times. It was always, let's do some influencer content, let's do this and that, but it's being called the creator economy because it genuinely has become an entire industry to itself. If you look at that right now and how it's going to be a strong part of marketing going ahead, what would your perspective be on that?
I think it's fantastic for everyone who's a creator or aspires to be a creator, because how you described someone starting at day one, right? They already have the tools in their hands. They can start building from the get-go. All you need is an internet connection and a device, and you're a creator, right? That actually tells you that there is so much opportunity, and you've seen the boom happen on the platforms in recent years. There's so much. I love this guy. I forget his name, but he's a fantastic guy. I follow on LinkedIn. He puts a lot of stop motion videos that he creates for fun on LinkedIn. I've seen a lot of designers put out the work that they create on LinkedIn, and my interests, of course, varied. But there's this lady I follow who creates arts for children's books. I have never seen fresher art. Like there is no reason for me go look for art for children's books, but I saw her profile on LinkedIn and I just started following her. It's such a fantastic thing to look at to how she's approaching it. Get in the designer's mind. So as uh, a marketer who works with some of these experts on a day-to-day basis, it really fascinates me. For someone who is a creator, I think now is the best time. We're at the cutting edge of the creator economy because if you don't know what NFT is, now is the time to go look it up.
Yeah.
It may or may not pan out to be everything that it's being said, but the idea is you can now make money off something that you build with the device in your hand. On LinkedIn, I've seen so many people, build a lot of focused content. Rahul Subramaniam is actually a great example.
Example.
He's on LinkedIn and he's very clear. And he's here to make jokes. He's a comedian, and he makes jokes every day about all the nuggets he's seen. He's worked in a corporate before, so he makes a lot of jokes about corporate culture. And there, I think at one point in time, it described them as a shared cultural insight. If you remember, there were all these videos which would flood our feeds, which would, certain things X says or certain things Y people do. And, this identifier across us. And suddenly I'm like, I felt the same way. And I've experienced the same thing. Like everyone in Bombay who's asked a rickshaw to go to Andheri and you've met with a no, that's a shared cultural insight everyone has. And suddenly going, yes, so he's building on that. He's doing a great job. I've seen the number of likes on his posts are phenomenal. I wish I was as popular. But to wrap it up, I think it's the best time to be in the creator economy. And some of the things that I mentioned earlier hold true. Always be curious. Don't limit yourself. Keep exploring different things. And the second thing is be prepared to fail. The first video that you put up or the first piece of content that you put up, the first update, the first story may or may not go viral. Hate to say viral, but it may not. So keep doing it. Keep persevering. Consistency is really important. The first day you walk into the gym or lift a dumbbell, you don't expect to see muscles, right?
Yeah.
So why do you have the same expectation of your first post? If you have muscles, fantastic, right? If it goes viral, great. But are you able to replicate it? You have to go to the gym for a year to see a change each one to their own, but it's what I'm getting at is consistency. Keep going back, keep hammering at it. Even if that doesn't do well, you've learned so much about yourself as a content creator, as the platforms you're working on. There's so much to do that you can do, but step one is just learning. And last thing, everyone who wants to show that they are what they say they are, Varun is a great example of someone who actually hired someone who reached out to him and said, I will help you, brand yourself personally. And I don't want to tell your story, Varun. I think you should tell that story.
Yeah, I don't know. So there's a guy whose name is also Varun, who reached out to me and he said, okay, why don't you just think of just branding a few pieces around, right? What can just your profile picture, some of the others. Never thought about it. So I said, okay, let's try it out. And he said he'd do it for me for free. I said, I will not let anyone do this for free. So, and he built a bunch of pieces out. That actually got me thinking, even till date, all the content I built started that day because I'm like, till then you're just putting stuff out like a regular consumer does, right? Of any other products, you're putting stuff out. That's when I started looking at it from a very design, branding, structured lens. So even now, when a lot of the stuff, sometimes I make stuff myself, but I'm also thinking about, okay, is the design consistent? Is the tonality consistent? So a lot of the stuff you'd end up doing for brands, you end up doing as I call myself a creator now. So I will say as a creator.
You should. Everyone's a creator.
Yeah, totally. And because that's the beauty of it, right? Is the fact that if you flip that around, everybody on all sides of the chain, if you are a creator who's doing a certain piece for a brand, the person on the brand, hypothetically, let's say you are a creator, you host a podcast, so and someone at the agency is also doing something. So everybody is a creator. So the creator thing kind of spreads across. So you have what you do as a professional, what you do as a creator. In some cases, you can do only the creator. In some cases, the balance of both actually makes you better at either side. So
the goal is to be a professional creator.
Yeah, that's actually.
But I really appreciate you hiring that guy, and I think that's a great. Start reaching out. Start asking those questions. Worst case scenario, it's a no, but you have to be prepared to fail, right? So keep going back. Like if Varun hadn't reached out to you, he wouldn't be doing that for you.
Yeah.
Or he wouldn't have gotten mentioned on this webinar. So, I mean, you'd never know what one thing leads to another.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point to stop when somebody asks me about the reel with my daughter. I'm like, thanks. So like, Leah mentioned has happened. Eventually came in from somewhere. Yeah. So thanks, Sharan. This has been fabulous. It didn't feel like an hour. I think it went into all zones of things. And as always, this was a podcast. We just did it with the cameras on, is how I call it. And thanks a ton for coming on Future Forward Sessions, and to everybody else who tuned in as well. Thanks a ton. The guys at upGrad and LBB are doing a fabulous job of curating a great and interesting set of guests, and hope to see you guys again next Friday.
Thanks, Varun. Stay safe and mask up if you haven't already.
All the time. Double mask up now is what I'd say.
Double mask up, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.